come here, I show you something, okay? Never confuse something called emergency fund and savings. Most of the people, you ask them, hey, by the way, have you set aside the money just in case maybe you get fired? Maybe you can be able to eat, drink, and do all those things. Yes, I have the savings. Come on, I didn't ask about the savings. You see, when you talk about savings like an umbrella, it's like a big name and you get what I'm saying? I'm asking emergency fund. They're like, yeah, I have some savings. See, now, let me explain. There is a difference between an emergency fund and a savings, all right? And next time I'm going to talk about sinking fund, all right? Let's get into the business now. See, when we talk about an emergency fund, see what an emergency? An emergency is something that you cannot anticipate. Emergency. Let me just put the name on the board. They say if you think it, you do what? Correct, you ink it. See, emergency fund, you find this is a money that you set aside just in case something happens. For example, right now you're working. Let's say you get retrenched or you get fired. Oh, and God forbid, all right? So let's say it happens, all right? At that particular point, and you need to eat, drink, pay your house rent, or pay your bills, fuel your car if you have it, and all those kind of things. We call them the recurrent expenditure. RE, recurrent expenditure. Recurrent expenditure, these are the things that you do them continuously. It's like the government. You see, each and every year in Kenya, the government usually read the budget around, I don't know, that 1st of June or something of sort. So each and every, there are things that, for example, you have to pay your bills, the electricity, the water, drinking, dressing, school fees, all those kind of things. Those are recurrent. They recur each and every time. So when you set aside some cash somewhere, all right, that money is meant to cater for those things. Let's say, for example, you get fired today. You do not have an active source of income. You don't want to go and start, breaking the coffers where you've set a money for your investments, or you don't want to go and disturb your investments and what have you. What you do, you create another basket where you put some cash purposefully for the purposes of what? Meeting the recurrent expenditure. And now, guess what I will say? On the emergency fund, we don't put the emergency fund in an investment. You cannot tell me that your emergency fund is in shares. That you've bought shares now. I have shares worth $1 million shilling. Now that is my emergency fund. No, emergency fund, it should be the money that you can access within a click of a button. Because, for example, let's say you want to pay electricity right now. You cannot start thinking about, hey, I want to sell my shares. I want to go into my SACCO and sign that document. I want to get my money let's say in 2 months or something. It's a money. You get what I'm saying, okay? Especially if you're an adult, you have to understand, especially if you have kids and all those kind of things. At any given moment, something can arise that needs money. That's not the time to think about how can I liquidate my shares. No, emergency fund should be in liquid form. You can access that money at any given time within a click of a button, all right? Now, see, when we talk an emergency fund, these are the principles of creation of an emergency fund. I made a whole video about that. You can go check it, the previous video out there. Now, they usually say, or we suggest, that you should have at least 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund. What does it mean? Let's say for a month, you usually consume 40K. If someone gives you 40,000 in a month, you've paid your house rent, you've actually eaten, you pay your electricity, your water, and what have you. So you survive on the 40,000. I did not say salary. You see, I have to explain this for you to understand. I did not say if you earn 40,000. No, I said in a month you need 40,000 to survive, to eat, to pay your school fees, to pay the debt that you have, to make sure that you pay your electricity, the water, the recurrent consumption. You survive on 40,000. So when we say that you need an emergency of 3 to 6 months, it means for the lower part, that is 3 times 40, you need like 120,000 all the way to 240. For 6 times 40,000, you need 120,000 all the way to 240,000. Okay. For example, if you survive on this, you need 120K all the way to 240,000 for you to be what? To be on the green zone. We call it the green zone. The green zone, okay? Some people you might find they have an emergency fund of 2 years. For me, I usually say, that's an idle money. The moment it exceeds 1 year, the moment it exceeds, let's say, even 8 months, that one should be regarded as investment. You shouldn't keep your money somewhere. That's now overdoing. It's okay if you can have an emergency fund that goes for 20 years if you safe and secure. And if you have an emergency fund that can take you a lifetime, I don't know. But the point is this. See, at least 3 to 6 months. Why do we say 3 to 6 months? Between this period, or in between this period of time, you can actually find a way of getting yourself on feet and all those kind of things. Maybe starting a business, maybe getting another job and what have you. Things are not standing. The static, you're actually pushing your life along the way. So that is an emergency fund. Now, the question that people ask me, where should I put my emergency fund? Should I put it in an investment? Yeah, you can, but this investment, should it be an investment that, for example, I can't advise you to take your emergency fund and put in a treasury bonds or treasury bills, because that one is you actually, you cannot be able to access that money at any given time. But if you put it in an MMF, in a money market fund, you can withdraw your money within a day or 2 or 3 if it goes far. Okay, now, and if you maybe want the entire amount of money that you have, maybe in 4 days you can be able to get your money. All right, although still we really don't love to say there is a waiting time. The emergency fund, in most cases, some people say emergency fund should just be in a current account somewhere fixed, not really then fixed, just somewhere whereby even right now, even at night, you can just withdraw and access that money. So if you've taken care of all your investment just around you, it's okay, you can put this money in that specific place for that purpose that you're having out there. Okay, now we were talking about the emergency fund. Now, what is a savings? Saving, in most cases, I know savings may sound as if it's an umbrella that houses the emergency fund, the sinking fund, and what. But the point is this: most of the time, the saving is perceived as the money meant for the purposes of investment. Okay, for example, you might have something like 120k on your emergency fund, and at the same time, let's say you have something like 600k in a savings account. These two are different. Why? This one is meant for the recurrent expenditure. This one is meant for investment. At that particular point now, this 100k is what is meant for you to grow yourself. Remember one thing that I always tell you, and I cannot forget to remind you. Let me just put it here for us to understand better. See, we usually say life is divided into two things. Okay, not really life, but I will say your things are actually divided into two. We have the sustainables, and usually have what we call the developmentals. Okay, now what happens, these two things are essential. This one is for sustainability as a human being. You need to eat, dress, and all those kind of things. The development is when now you think about, I want to buy a piece of land, I want to build, I want to buy a car, I want to grow myself, I want to move to the next level. See, now what happens, this 600k is what you channel towards an investment, is what you channel towards something that is actually earning some income for you. You can put it, and there is an array of things that you can be able to do. It doesn't have to be an investment, it can be a business. Depends on who you ask and how you actually can do your things. That is exactly how we go about it. So differentiate between a savings and a emergency fund. And with that regard, allow me to just go ahead and talk about the sinking fund. Then there is something called the sinking fund. Sinking fund, this is a quite of a different interest. I'm not going to go ahead and use the economics to explain this one. I'm going to use the simplest language. We call it the layman's language. Sinking fund is that money that you set aside on the purposes of, you anticipate a certain time will arise and I will need a certain amount of money. Therefore, you keep it aside. For example, let's say you have a kid who is about to finish the primary school, okay? And you know this kid gonna join the high school, and for them to join the high school, obviously there is a money required, you know, the transition of one level of education to the other. Or maybe let's say you have a kid that is actually finishing the high school, is about to join the university. So you anticipate by the end of this year, at the beginning of next year, I have a kid that is joining high school, or rather university. And at that regard, then I need a certain amount of money. Why? Probably they need a laptop, probably they need this and this and this and that, the school fees and what have you. I need the next amount of money. So when we talk about the sinking fund, is the money that you set aside. You already know it is defined. By next year, January, God willing, I will need this amount of money for my kid to actually join the university. But when you're putting aside the emergency fund, you do not know. You cannot tell how it will be. You're just setting aside just in case. And I always tell people, sometimes it's good to be a little bit paranoid with life. Behave as if something can happen. See, when you behave as if something will happen, actually you don't even get surprised. That way, you actually, you see, they usually say, I know this is a little bit of a digress. They usually say that you cannot hurt an overthinker, because an overthinker, they usually think about all the possible ways out that can actually transpire with the situation that is coming in. So the same case you're supposed to approach life with, okay? Sinking fund, you set it aside. For example, say you have a pregnant wife, okay? She has already tell you, hey, guess what, babe? I'm pregnant. Okay, fine. So you know very well, according to the gestation, in the 9 months period time, you're expecting a kid. And the kids comes with the responsibilities, you know, eating, diapers, all those kind of things, schooling and what have you. You can actually decide to take a what we call an MMF or treasury bills or treasury bonds or a SACCO or any tool that you can use, or a vehicle or a machine that you can use to accumulate cash in that specific area that is not just accumulation, but at the same time you're actually investing, that is growing, so that by the time now that need of money arises, you already have the money, and also on top of that, you already have the baby monies on top of that. That is exactly what you're supposed to. Now, that's the difference between a sinking fund, an emergency fund, and a savings. I know maybe you might say, say that saving actually houses all of them. Probably you're right or wrong at the same time, but largely the savings are called the money that you usually use out there to invest and be able to grow yourself to the next level. Now, what can I say at the tail end of this video? It is good when you understand what you need at what particular time. And I remember there's a video that I made and I told you guys, there are people who need cash flow. There are people who are okay with cash flow as we speak. They need the asset. And there are people who they have the cash flow, they have the asset, but now what they need is to safeguard their property. Because remember one thing, the first principle of money when you have it is not even investing it, it's to safeguard it, is to retain it, is still to make it be under your ownership. For God's sake, if you have 100,000, that is yours, it's under your name. How can you prolong the ownership of that? And if it's possible, then how can you own that money forever? And again, you know very well, just owning that amount of money, you violate a certain principle. You need to make that money work for you, for it to grow and be able to propagate itself to the next level. And then that's when you think about investment. And when you think about investment, first then you think it's about the capital preservation. You want to invest in something that actually secured the first rule. You don't violate the first rule for the sake of you investing on the second rule. So you have to understand all the nitty-gritties of all those kind of things for you to be able to go ahead and be able to invest. And please, if you understand the importance of the emergency fund, this will actually save you from a lot of problems that you can be able to get, especially when one gets fired. I've ever seen somebody, and I know all you watching this video, you know what is COVID-19. We were all alive by God's grace, and we are here till this particular point. Now, do you remember, or can you actually recall someone who was actually fired? Or maybe they had a business that actually went down, and you can just imagine what was happening. You know, some of the problems were trolling them. They were not even able to pay their house rent and what have you. Businesses were closed and all those kind of things. So you can just imagine if you didn't have an emergency fund. And if you didn't, then you did learn a lesson at that particular point. It's always good to make sure that as much as we do talk about all the time investment, leave yourself some cash somewhere. Because I always tell people, hey, even if you have parcels of land and what have you, a time comes when you realize, especially when you grow old, you really assets don't really matter a lot. They don't matter to you, they matter to your kids because they're the one to inherit. But you're still alive, for God's sake. You still need to eat, you still need to drink, you still need to do all those kind of things. So at that particular point, I always tell people, when you are young, deal with cash flow. Deal with acquisition of the asset that are actually generating the cash flow. As you grow old, try now to transit from not just asset, but asset that generate cash flow. Because when you grow old, you really need cash flow. Because cash is king. Because you cannot show up to a grocery store and with a title deed and you want to do the shopping. You need money. That's what you're supposed to understand. Anyway, I hope you've gotten the message of this video and you've gotten it right, and that is the most important thing that I can ever say. And thank you very much for liking the video. Thank you very much for subscribing, and thank you for also, because you're now thinking of how you can actually get that number of mine from the description of this specific video. Shoot me a call and have a discussion. My number is always there if you'd like to have a conversation with me, if all about investments, about savings and what have you. Go ahead and do that. For now, it's a goodbye and see you in the next one.